It looked like a simple leadership change. Intel owned the age of the PC. Nvidia rode the AI boom. That is the public version, and it misses the real story because Nvidia did not overtake Intel when AI suddenly got hot. It overtook Intel earlier than that, when it stopped behaving like a chip company and started becoming the system developers were already building on. By the time AI spending exploded, Intel was still trying to defend the old center of computing. Nvidia had already built the road into the new one, so this was never just a GPU beating a CPU. It was a shift in where computing power actually lived, and by the time the market saw that shift clearly, the balance had already broken. For years, Intel looked like the unavoidable core of modern computing. PCs, enterprise fleets, traditional servers. Intel did not just participate in that world, it helped define it. The company became the default logic of serious compute. Nvidia lived in a different category. Important, yes, but still easier to treat as a specialist. When a company that looks peripheral ends up redefining the stack, it usually means the market shifted before most people noticed. And that is the real setup here. The visible rivalry was about chips. The real battlefield was architecture, software, developer behavior, deployment speed, and who became easiest to build on when the next wave arrived. In the old order, Intel looked foundational and Nvidia looked specialized. Intel processors powered the PC boom, anchored enterprise infrastructure, and stayed close to the center of how the market thought about scale. Nvidia, by comparison, was associated far more with graphics than with the deeper logic of computing itself. That distinction shaped expectations. Intel looked close to the core. Nvidia looked like an edge case with strong products. But there was a hidden vulnerability inside that old hierarchy. The company that appears closest to the center can become most exposed when the center moves. Nvidia did not start by replacing Intel. It started by doing work Intel's processors were not designed to do as efficiently. In 1999, Nvidia launched the GeForce 256 and called it the world's first GPU. At first, that mattered most in gaming and 3D graphics, but strategically, something bigger was happening. The market was being taught a new division of labor. Some of the most demanding tasks no longer had to live on the central processor alone. They could move toward highly parallel silicon built for a different kind of job. That was not the takeover. It was the first crack in the CPU-centered worldview. And once the market accepts a crack like that, the next question is no longer whether the old center still matters. It is whether it remains the only center that matters. The deeper breakthrough came in 2006 with CUDA. That is when Nvidia stopped being just a hardware company and started becoming a computing platform. The GPU was no longer just a graphics component. It became a programmable engine that developers could use for simulation, research, high-performance computing, and later machine learning. That changed the business logic completely. Because once developers build habits on top of your hardware, the hardware is no longer the whole product. Libraries matter. Tools matter. Familiarity matters. Time to deployment matters. This is where Nvidia stopped waiting for a future market and started preparing one. Long before AI became an industrial arms race, Nvidia was building the bridge that would make that arms race easier to enter, and that is what makes stories like this dangerous to read in real time. For years, Nvidia still looked tied to gaming. Intel still looked tied to the categories the market treated as central: PCs, traditional servers, legacy compute leadership. So the old order still felt intact, even while the next one was quietly gaining leverage underneath it. Public reporting later pointed to Intel missing or underweighting several major transitions, including mobile and key AI opportunities. So the issue was never that Intel suddenly became irrelevant. The issue was that the next strategic center was forming somewhere else, and Intel was not the company defining it. For a while, this still looked survivable for Intel. It had scale, brand power, manufacturing ambition, deep customer relationships, and the semiconductor landscape was crowded enough to hide the real threat inside the noise. That is the false resolution, because once AI infrastructure became the new spending center, the market stopped rewarding prestige in the abstract. It started rewarding whoever could turn demand into a working system fastest. Intel still looked important. Nvidia started looking unavoidable, and those are very different positions. One earns respect, the other starts setting the terms of the market. This is the part casual viewers usually miss. Nvidia's advantage was no longer just about making a powerful chip. It was about turning that chip into a system. Software libraries, developer familiarity, networking, AI servers, cloud partnerships, reference architectures, and deployment confidence. Nvidia's own language increasingly describes the company as full-stack computing infrastructure. That matters because it matches how customers actually buy when the workloads are expensive and urgent. They are not just buying silicon, they are buying compatibility, tooling, throughput, and a lower chance of failure at scale. Intel, meanwhile, was trying to rebuild execution while also carrying the cost and complexity of a manufacturing turnaround. So the visible fight was still chip versus chip. The real battlefield had already become system versus system. And that brings us to the hinge factor. The deepest reason Nvidia surpassed Intel is not simply that AI became enormous. It is that when AI demand turned into an industrial buying frenzy, Nvidia was already sitting on the bridge between interest and implementation. CUDA had been compounding for years, developers were already trained on it, workflows already leaned toward it, and public reporting later described that software layer as one of Nvidia's biggest competitive advantages, strong enough that major rivals have actively tried to reduce dependence on it. That is the payoff to everything that came before. Nvidia did not just have a chip when the AI wave arrived, it had the default lane. Intel still had processors, factories, and history. Nvidia had the ecosystem many AI builders were already prepared to use. In a platform shift, that difference is brutal. Once that system advantage met the AI spending boom, the collision became visible to everyone. Nvidia reported fiscal 2026 revenue of $215.9 billion, with fourth quarter revenue of $68.1 billion. Intel reported full year 2025 revenue of $52.9 billion. Those numbers are not just a scoreboard. They show where the market's new center of gravity is being funded, scaled, and reinforced. That is why this rivalry feels harsher than older semiconductor rivalries. This is no longer just a contest over product reputation. It is a contest over who defines the infrastructure layer of the next computing era. That does not make Nvidia untouchable. Its lead still depends on execution, supply, advanced packaging, and a software moat competitors are actively trying to weaken. Intel is not standing still either. Under new leadership, it is still trying to streamline operations, rebuild credibility, and find a route back into the AI era. But the burden is heavier now. Recovering in public is one thing. Catching up after the market has already reorganized around somebody else's platform is something else entirely. Intel once looked like the unavoidable center of modern computing. Nvidia looks closer to that role now, but the larger lesson is harsher than a simple winner-loser story. The company that dominates the visible market is not always the one best positioned for the next one. Sometimes the real winner is the company building the next center before the rest of the industry agrees that the center has moved at all. You've watched Triumphs and Troubles. Subscribe to the channel for true business stories and comment, which company should we cover next?